I'm going to be talking about fingerspelling. I've been doing a lot of research on it. I've been studying about how hearing people learn fingerspelling and how deaf people use fingerspelling, and I've been studying the comparisons. Hearing people tend to struggle when they're learning fingerspelling, and I wanted to understand where the struggle is coming from. What's interesting is that hearing people learn spelling later when they're like 6 or 7, when they go into school. They learn how to spell in the written form. Before they go to school, they just listen to everything. Deaf children learn fingerspelling, which is different from spelling. I wanted to understand how deaf children acquire their skills of fingerspelling without being formally taught how to fingerspell and understand fingerspelling. Let's say that there's a deaf baby being held by their parent who is also deaf, and their parent is signing and fingerspelling to them. The baby is watching the movement, not the individual letters. Hearing people look at fingerspelling, and they're trying to get the individual letters. And that's because that thought process comes from when they were learning how to spell in school. That transfers into when they're trying to understand fingerspelling. So now I want to understand what the thought process for a deaf child is when they're learning fingerspelling. For example, let's say a parent is signing to their child, do you want some peas? Those small green balls, do you want some peas? When the child sees the fingerspelled word peas, they don't see the individual P-E-A. They're connecting the shape of that letter to the peas. That is called configuration, seeing it as a whole. Once they see that shape, they connect it to something. Or, for example, let's say a parent is saying, look at that yellow bus. When they fingerspell bus, they don't turn their hand to their child to fingerspell bus. It stays facing the bus. For that child, they connect the shape of bus, and in their brain, they see bus. In their thought process, they don't see B-U-S. When they see the shape of bus, they see the vehicle in their brain. And that's very normal in conversation. What else is interesting is, let's say that we were testing a child on their fingerspelling skills. Let's say a parent asks, what is this little green ball, what is it? Of course, when the child fingerspells, they don't have a clean P-E-A, but they're able to produce something similar. Or bus. Let's say the parent was asking, what is that? Again, the child can produce something similar, but it's not a clean B-U-S because they understand the general shape. And they're able to understand both, that they're not the same thing. Once they can understand that, they see that these shapes, this configuration, these fingerspelled words represent something. So that's what it looks like when deaf children learn how to learn fingerspelling early. There's also in fingerspelling natural and unnatural fingerspelling. First, I'll talk about natural fingerspelling. For example, go. It's not a formal G-O. It has movement in it. It goes from inwards, it's moving from inwards outwards. Or the fingerspelled word for back. Of course, I'm not saying I'm coming back here. The movement is going from outwards inwards. That movement also gives it meaning. What's another example? The word for ceiling. For ceiling, as your fingerspell in your hand is facing upwards and moving upwards. Or the fingerspell word for floor, your hand is lowered because the floor is below you. Or for signed names, let's say someone's name is Bob and their sign name is at their head, that has meaning. That sign represents that person. All of these signs, all these fingerspelled words, they have a movement, and that's natural. For unnatural signs, what I notice is that they tend to be words that are academic text words. For example, this fingerspelled word for gravity. Gravity, if you're trying to get those individual letters, that's not natural. It's very different from the natural words that have movement. Those unnatural text words, that's similar to why hearing people struggle with fingerspelling, because they're trying to get those individual letters. So now hearing people are curious, they want to know, are we supposed to fingerspell everything? There are rules about when to use fingerspelling. There are a lot of rules, but I'm only going to talk about a few. First rule, you should always fingerspell the names of people. For example, President Clinton, you fingerspell the name Clinton. Or you should always fingerspell the name of books, the title of books, or the title of movies. For example, Shine. You don't sign the word shine. That breaks the rules. Fingerspell shine. You should also fingerspell the names of cities as well. Another rule is to use fingerspelling for specifying words. Let's say I signed the word meat and fingerspelled the word steak. The word meat is general, but if I was talking about steak, I would sign meat and then fingerspell steak. Another example is bird. Again, another general word, but if I was talking about a parrot, I'd sign word and then fingerspell parrot. Another rule is that you can fingerspell for emphasis. For example, you can fingerspell cool, you can fingerspell best, or can. Again, you can fingerspell those words for emphasis. Another rule is, let's say that you were having a conversation with someone and you use a word that they don't recognize. You could fingerspell that word and help them understand what that sign means. Let's say I used a sign and someone doesn't understand what that means. I could fingerspell what it means. In this case, that sign is abstract. Once I fingerspell that word, that person understands what that sign means. And those are just a few rules on fingerspelling. So now, hearing people want to know how to learn fingerspelling. What's the best way to go about that? Often hearing people have signs in ASL and they'll be doing fine, and then once a fingerspelling word comes up, they get stuck. What I suggest is trying to look at the fingerspelled words as a whole. Look at the shape. Look at the movement of the hand. Which way is it moving? Which direction is it going? Let your eyes be flexible in seeing the word as a whole. Once you can understand that, you're able to make those connections and understanding what those fingerspelled words means. Once you get that down, fingerspelling is going to be super easy. It's just like how deaf children learn fingerspelling. They're not getting the individual letters, they're looking at the shape, looking at the fingerspelled word as a whole, and that's very important in fingerspelling. Because when you're learning fingerspelling, there's a lot of different ways to use fingerspelling. There's natural fingerspelling, there's unnatural fingerspelling. There's also rules about when to use fingerspelling. Fingerspelling is important, and there are different reasons to use fingerspelling. And fingerspelling and spelling are not the same. For spelling, that has to do more with text, but fingerspelling is different. So learning fingerspelling, if you learn spelling first, requires it's a different thought process than what you're used to. So I really hope that you enjoy learning fingerspelling.